It's great having all of you here this morning, and welcome to River City Church, especially to those of you that are guests here this morning. If you are our guests, and we haven't had an opportunity to meet yet, my name's Jonathan. I'm one of the pastors here, and we just want to welcome you to our time, our gathering each and every week, where we just celebrate Jesus. And so let's just thank the band before I go forward for leading us this morning. And every week, I used to say this fairly frequently, but every week, if I just lay an egg up here, at least you can count on the music's going to be good, okay? If the sermon's just terrible, at least you'll get some good time of worship. So I appreciate Dave and the band for being here, and they have one more song to share with us at the end of the service, so don't sneak out early. So back in 2018, one spring morning, I woke up, and I felt a little off. Actually, I felt like hot garbage. I felt terrible. I had a low-grade fever, a pounding headache, the sniffles, sore throat. And to be honest with you guys, I was super annoyed by it because I had a really busy week that week. I had a lot that I needed to get done, and I didn't have time to be sick. Y'all know what I'm talking about? But what I knew is that these symptoms were not something that I had never experienced before. But sadly, unfortunately, I deal with this pretty much every year. And what I believed is that this was probably the early stages of a sinus infection. And so I knew that if I hurried up and I played my cards right, and I hurried and went down to see my friends down at Faith Family Medical, that they would give me a sinus cocktail shot, maybe a few other medicines, and then I'd be on my way. And by the weekend, hopefully I'd be back at church with a smile on my face, just talking about how amazing God is. So I set my appointment. I went in to see the doctor, and after I shared my symptoms with her, she began to take my vitals. Yes, I had a little fever. Also, I had, my blood pressure was fine. My nose, I guess, looks good as she looked in that. My throat, all those things. But then at the very end, she took the stethoscope and she put it to my chest and she began to listen to my heart. She listened for a few seconds. She then moved it to the outside, listened again. She then laid me back, listened again. And then she sat me up and she looked at me and she paused and she said, "So how long have you had that heart murmur?" And I immediately responded. I said, "What heart murmur? I don't have a heart murmur." For those of you that were around back then, you know that that was the beginning of a crazy season for myself and my family, a very scary season. And for those of you that weren't around back then, the short story is after I saw my cardiologist, I was informed that I had ruptured my mitral valve and that it was very serious and that I needed to have surgery immediately so that nothing really bad took place. So thankfully, within weeks, we were able to schedule a surgery. They were able to crack me open, repair the mitral valve, and then I was into the process, the slow process of trying to recover, to begin trying to feel like I was 42 again instead of 92, which is how I felt right after surgery. Well, about a month or month and a half into my recovery, I was seated on the couch with Melissa, and we were just watching some TV, and I leaned over and I told her, I said, "Hey, babe, I'm feeling a little off." And she looked at me and a little concerned, and understandably so, because the last time I felt a little off, my heart was about to blow up. So she asked me, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, no, the ticker's okay, I think. But I feel a little off up here, that my brain felt a little off. And I told her, I said, my brain doesn't feel like it did before surgery, now after surgery. And the best way I knew how to describe this is I told her, I said, I don't feel like I'm firing on all cylinders. Now, ladies, y'all know how to do this well. She just sat there. She didn't say anything, but I knew what she was thinking, is that what's new, right? From the whole time she's known me, my brain's probably never really fired on all cylinders, and that's okay. But I told her, I said, my brain felt kind of stuck. And as I described it to her, I told her, I said, my memory, I just can't remember things like I used to. I can't string thoughts together. I get kind of distracted. I lose thoughts. And the words that I had accrued over a lifetime to that point, I would lose them and I couldn't find them. And to be real with you, I just felt super awesome about myself. Because who doesn't want to have a pastor that can't string thoughts together and words and remember anything, right? Can you imagine the marketing campaigns for River City? Hey, come check out our church. Our pastor's heart works great now, but his brain's kind of stuck. Everybody would want to go to that church, wouldn't they? But seriously, I was really just concerned. I was really thinking, like, what is this? What do I need to do? So I ended up seeing a neurologist, and after a series of tests, including an MRI, one day I was seated in the neurologist's office, and he sat down with me, and he began to share with me what they had discovered. And I wasn't losing my mind that what they found is that during my surgery, I had a series of strokes. And they had left some damage, minimal, but some damage to my brain. And he began to talk to me about brain health. Now, guys, listen, brain health to me was something that I was interested in already, and primarily because My dad, who I grew up with, who was athletic, who ran all the time, he played tennis, he was constantly on the go. People used to call him Hot Rod, by the way. That was his nickname. That I had seen him transform from that man about a decade before that into a man where he needed assistance tying his shoes because of the neurological disease Parkinson's. So brain health to me was already one of those things that I was aware of and I was, focused on. But now I'm in the chair and the neurologist is talking to me about my personal brain health. And so as he shared this information with me, I began to ask questions. I said, okay, doc, so tell me, what can I do to take my old brain back? Now, I know it sounds weird, but my old brain was a whole lot better than my current brain at the time. So I said, what can I do to heal this? What can I do to repair what's been damaged? And he began to share with me some encouragement and some things that weren't that encouraging and saying, well, these are some things you can do. So when I left his office that day, I was absolutely determined that I was going to do everything I could to take back, if you will, my health. I wanted my brain to be as healthy as possible. And so I dove headlong into learning and researching and listening to everything I could by Dr. Daniel Amen. Now, Dr. Daniel Amen is a psychiatrist here in our country who is pretty well known nowadays because he's worked with NFL players and concussion protocols. He's done some of the greatest studies there along with other people. And what he is credited with is helping provide help as well as hope for people with all types of trauma that they've experienced with their brain to get healthy again. And so I began to listen to everything, read everything I could, and I even took his brain health certification course that he wrote for brain health experts. And I began to just implement everything I knew to do that he was saying to do, from exercise to sleep to nutrition to supplements. I even bought a mild hyperbaric oxygen chamber to help heal my brain. I began doing all those things. And slowly but surely, those cylinders, thank goodness, began to fire again. My brain began to wake up again. I was able to string thoughts together. I was able to remember things again. And those Rolodex of words that I couldn't find for a while, I was able to go and access those words again. And to say that I was relieved, man, it would be an understatement. But what I didn't see coming is that in the midst of learning about brain health and learning more at just a very micro level and just down in the, if you will, the weeds, I also began to learn a lot more about what we call today mental health. And what I saw is that not only is it possible to get stuck with brain health where you have a lack of clarity and memory and stringing thoughts together, but also you can also get stuck in anxiety and depression. And as I began to learn more about anxiety and depression and deal with that, I began to think about just relationships I'd had throughout my life, friends, family, acquaintances, and others that at times in their life, they were going through these rough patches, if you will, and as I learned more about what they were going through and what goes on, if you will, in the brain, I began to have a lot more compassion for these folks. That I started to understand a little bit better that these people were at war with their own brain, as Dr. Amen would say. So as I began thinking about them, I also started thinking about myself, and I started asking the question, so how's my mental health? Like, really? What's going on up in my noggin? And as I thought about anxiety, I remember thinking, okay, well, yeah, I could get anxious, but I struggle with that some, but is this normal or is this an elevated level that's unhealthy? As I thought about depression, I began to think through that. Okay, yeah, I feel down from time to time, but is this normal? Because, let's face it, we live in a crazy, jacked up world, don't we? So is this normal or is this abnormal, what I'm dealing with? And so as I worked through that, I really didn't have good answers, but I was determined to find out. So about a year and a half later, I went ahead and I scheduled an appointment to go to Amen Clinics. The closest one to us is in Atlanta, Georgia. And I set that appointment with them specifically because I wanted to see someone that could look at, through imaging technology, the health of my brain as well as the mental health. And this is a technology that they are known for using. They're called SPECT scans. And so I want to show you guys just quickly how small my brain is, which will not surprise any of you. So as you're looking at this with me, I'll just describe briefly what you're seeing is on the right-hand side, kind of the rainbow color picture of my brain. That is the health of my brain, the outside of my brain. And what's on the left, the blue and pink and white, that is what's taking place on the inside. That's the, if you will, the electricity, the currents in the brain, where the regions of the brain. So when I sat down with my psychiatrist after having these scans done, he gave me just really what was taking place in my brain, and he spoke first to the overall health. And what he said is that, Jonathan, your brain all in all is pretty healthy. that the work that I'd put in, given the trauma my brain had been through from strokes during surgery, that work had paid off, and it was really helping what I was doing. I wasn't where I needed to be yet, but it was working, and I needed to keep going. But on the other side, he looked at just the regions of the brain, and he looked at the activity. And the best way I know how to put this is that the areas of the brain where depression and anxiety are known to hang out, they were what I would call charged. They were hot, and not in a good way, but they were hot. And what he expressed to me is that, Jonathan, the areas of anxiety and depression, you are, in so many words, I'm using my own words, you are stuck in anxiety and you're stuck in depression. Yippee. I had the double whammy. That for me, I was in this place in life where I was torn over what could happen as well as I was torn over what did happen. This is where I was in life. Now, thankfully, with this psychiatrist, he began to talk to me and work through a plan, to build a plan to work on my brain health, but also my mental health. This consisted of just spiritual things with God, because he himself is also a Christian. We also began to talk about just these physical things and the importance of sleep and recovery and nutrition and supplements, as well as taking medication as needed, along with relationships and all these other things that you can do to help work on your mental health. And so I began to implement this plan, and I'm thankful that as I stand before you today, in many ways, my brain is a lot healthier than what it was before. I haven't arrived. I'm still working at it. But I feel so much more hope now than what I did in the past. Now, guys, I'm just going to share with you this morning that I struggled getting up here on this platform and communicating that with y'all a little bit today. And the reason why is because I know there's a fine line in life of oversharing and undersharing personal things that you go through in life. I also recognize, too, that I'm on a platform, so I can't answer your yeah, but, and what if, and how about that questions up here. At least not right now. Maybe after the service, as long as there's not too many of them. Got to go to lunch. But I recognize that. But I want to share with you my reason and my hope for sharing a little bit of my backstory with you today. I share that with you today because I believe it is absolutely of the utmost importance for all of us to take our brain health and our mental health seriously as people. What I have learned is that in this world that we live in, pain comes to us and challenges come to us in a lot of forms. And it's not always in the form of sinus infections and heart surgeries and broken bones and twisted ankles. But pain also comes toward us in the form of broken promises, shattered dreams, losing loved ones, and other types of pain that we experience in this life. And as the wise philosopher Tommy Boy would say, that's going to leave a mark, okay? It does. It wounds us. And as I saw, even in the images of my brain, our brain, or there's some resources out there that say the body keeps the score, our brain captures that. And so it is of the utmost importance that we all take this very seriously. And so today and the rest of our time together, what I want to do is spend some time talking to you about what the scriptures have to say about mental health. And specifically, what I want to do is I want to tell you and share with you the number one truth that I have experienced and learned throughout my journey to this point that has helped me get unstuck and stay unstuck from anxiety and depression. Now, I want to share this with you because I recognize all of us have been through things, all of us are probably going through things, and all of us will go through things in the future. And that's why this is important for all of you to lean into today, even if you don't necessarily align or identify with where I am currently. But as we move forward, I think this will hopefully help you. And I want to just note this before we proceed. This is not a one approach fixes everything. There are a lot of things that go into your mental health. As I said earlier, physical things, spiritual things, and others. But today I'm going to focus in on the spiritual truth that I have learned that's had the greatest impact. As we jump in, I want to begin by sharing a quote with you by a true philosopher, ancient philosopher, how he framed up life. And I love how he spoke to this. He said this: if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you're at peace, you are living in the present. It's pretty good, isn't it? If you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present. Lao Tzu. Now, he was a Chinese philosopher from way, way, way back in the day, and I just want to briefly explain what he's getting to, because I think this is so helpful. Is what he is saying is that to really live present in the moment, you have to have peace. This is where we all want to be in life. But what we all struggle with are these things in life that want to pull us into the future in anxiety and get us stuck there, or things that happen that want to pull us into the past and get us stuck in depression. But we all want to be here living at peace in the present. This is where we want to be. None of us want to get stuck living in the future. None of us want to get stuck living in the past. We all want to live here in peace. The question is, how do you do that? How do you find that peace to live present in the moment? So back in my early 20s, I was someone that really had a bad case of FOMO, fear of missing out. I just believed life was going to pass me by. I was afraid that I was going to miss out on marrying the girl of my dreams. Thankfully, that didn't happen. I did marry the girl of my dreams. And I wish she was here actually today to hear me say that, because I would get some points on that. Hopefully she's watching. That's for you, babe, if you're watching. But I seriously was afraid of that. I was afraid of missing out on the career of my dreams. I was afraid of a lot of things. And I guess one day my dad, he caught on to the fact that I was in a high-stress situation, so he decided to invite me to meet him for lunch in his favorite lunch spot in the city, Piccadilly. Okay? No lie. That was his favorite spot. My dad was convinced Piccadilly had the healthiest food in town. You said, Dad, when you go eat healthy, we were going to Piccadilly. So I obliged my dad. I met him over at Piccadilly. We went through the line and we took, all that slop they pile on your plate, put on my tray. We walked over to the table. And when we sat down at the table, Dad began to ask me, so what's up? What's on your mind? And as he was sitting there eating whatever that was on his plate, I just shared with him what all I was going through. And after I finished sharing, and I began to now eat my ice cold food, my dad said these 3 words to me: enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. When my dad said that to me, that's all he said: enjoy the journey. I looked at him, I finished my bite, and I said to him, Dad, that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I want to do. If everything would just work out, then I will enjoy the journey. Are you not listening to me? The issue was my dad knew that the way that I was approaching life, the way that I was thinking about life, that was not the way you enjoy the journey. And from that point forward, in the rest of our lunchtime together, he began to share with me, by quoting to me, some ancient words that a father had written to his son that's in the Old Testament. These are words that you all have heard before, but he shared these with me to remind me that this is how you are to enjoy the journey. In Proverbs chapter 3, beginning in verse 5, he said this: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways, know him, and he will make your path straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. This will be healing for your body and strengthening for your bones. Well, my dad knew on that day that he wanted for me to know is the truth about enjoying the journey is really this. It's very simple. To enjoy the journey, you must trust God along the way. That's what has to happen. To enjoy the journey, you have to trust God along the way. So seated at that table at Piccadilly were 2 men, an older man, very young man, a wise man, a very naive, ignorant man. And I was on the one side, and what was happening with me is I had all these things that I was convinced that if these things would work out the way that life, the way I wanted them to work out and all those things, then I would be able to enjoy the journey. So what I was doing is I was stuck in the future in anxiety. Across the table was my dad. And what he was saying to me is he was inviting me to come back out of the future into the present and to take those things that I was worried about, that I was stressed over, and to trust God with them, because he knew that to truly enjoy the journey, I had to trust God with those things. That's how I would find peace. That's how I would be able to live present in the moment, is by trusting God with all of that. Now here's the thing, guys. I know that every one of you have heard lots of messages on the importance of trusting God, right? Every one of us in here. All of us in here likely have encouraged others. Others have encouraged us with this. Many of you in here probably know parts or maybe all of these verses here in Proverbs about the importance of trusting God. You can maybe quote them. So why in the world am I giving you another message today about trusting God? I'll give you a very, very honest answer. It's because we're not good at it. we're not good at trusting God. We are actually good at talking about trusting God, but we're not really good at trusting God. See, my dad on that day was roughly the age where I am right now. And what he knew is that this life that we have, that we're in, has lots of twists and turns, ups and downs, and things are not going to work out the way that I would want them to. He'd learned this through his own life, through his own journey with God. And what he didn't want for me to do is to repeat, I'm sure, the same mistakes that he did, that he made, just like I don't with my kids today. And so what he was trying to do was encourage me, Jonathan, the way you live present with peace in the moment and enjoy the journey is you have to trust God. Now, in the 20 plus years since that conversation with my dad, the one main thing that I've had my eyes open to the most is why I struggle so much with trusting God. And hopefully this will help you understand what I've learned. Not too long ago, I picked up this newish book here by Mr. Brad Stulberg. The name of the book is The Practice of Groundedness. This is the title. A transformative path to success that feeds, not crushes, your soul. So I picked this book up and I began to read it, and you would think that maybe this is a Christian book or a spiritual book, but it's really not. It's just a book. What's interesting about Mr. Brad Stulberg is that he is a well-known author. He's published a couple of other books. He writes. He's also a consultant/coach for performance for a lot of high-flying corporate executives, influencers, professional athletes, and others. And what led him to write this book is that years ago he wrote a book called Peak Performance, where he maps out a plan or how to approach life where you can be successful and find happiness and all these things in life. And as he's been walking and journeying with his clients and he's been coaching them, what he started to figure out is that a lot of these people were at the top of the mountain. They're at the top of the mountain with their success, their notoriety, money, all those things, but inside they were at the bottom. They were miserable. And he figured out that as he started talking through this, that the very thing that led them to their success was the very same thing that was leading them to this place of misery. And he termed it heroic individualism. Heroic individualism. These people wanting to be heroes now felt like zeros. And so he describes this, and as I read the book, there were a number of quotes that really resonated with me, but there's this one I want to look at with you, and here is what he said about heroic individualism. Heroic individualism and its most prevalent symptoms: restlessness, feeling rushed, low-level angst, scatteredness, exhaustion, burnout, periods of emptiness, a compulsion to keep chasing the next thing, and recurrent longing describe what so many people report feeling these days. When I read what Mr. Stulberg had to say about heroic individualism and the symptoms of where this leads people, I began to think about these words that Solomon wrote in Proverbs 3, and what I would listen to my dad say across the table, and what I've listened and read, of course, myself so many times over the years, and I started to think, okay, so this is what Solomon was trying to warn his son over. This is what my dad was trying to warn me over, is that there are these two approaches to life that you can take. You can take this approach to life, the way life is designed to be experienced, where you trust God, or you can try to be a hero. Heroic individualism. That this trusting God leads to peace and enjoying the journey, but you trying to be a hero is going to lead you, as this list just explained, to a place where you have no peace, but you have a lot of other problems. And so as I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, this here is nothing new. Yeah, he calls it heroic individualism, but guys, this began in the beginning. What we see, the very first lie that was told to the very first people was that you don't need God because you can be like God. You don't have to trust God with your life because you can figure out how to enjoy the journey on your own. That this all began in the beginning. And so I want for you to look with me again. I'm going to read the verses a little bit slower. And I want for you to think about what Solomon is saying in these two different frameworks: trusting God, and then the other would be heroic individualism. You see it all through these words. Look with me again at verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. Heroic individualism. In all your ways know him, and he will make your path straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Heroic individualism. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. This will be healing for your body and strengthening for your bones. So what Solomon was getting at is that one of these approaches leads to peace. It's the way life is meant to be experienced. The other one leads you away from peace. Because one is depending and trusting on your Heavenly Father. The other one is you just trying to be a hero and saying, I don't need you, God, because I want to be like you. I got this. As I said earlier, the number one truth that I have learned and I continue to learn that has helped me get unstuck and stay unstuck with anxiety and depression is this truth here about the need to trust God. But here's the layer to this I didn't state earlier. What I'm seeing increasingly is that trust is all about relationship. It's relational. Trust is not something we do passively. It's not something we do by default because we're Christians. Trust is something, as Solomon says here, that you do from the heart. And to help you see this thought that Solomon wanted to communicate a little more clearly, the flow of thought, I've taken the creative liberties to remove one of the phrases out of verse 5 so we can put verse 5 and verse 6 together and you can see this with me. Look with me. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. In all your ways, know Him, and He will make your paths straight. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. In all your ways, know Him, and He will make your path straight. God has created us ultimately and given us life, first and foremost, to know Him relationally. This is why when Jesus was asked, what's the number one command in life? That He stated, it is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. You are here ultimately, and God created you ultimately for Him to be your closest relationship in this life. This word here, know Him, in the Hebrew, that word know is a word of relational. It's intimacy, it's closeness. He's to be your closest friend. As I've thought through this personally, what I see is that the way this works practically in my life, or the way it should, is that God is to be in the number one relationship spot in my life. Melissa's to be number 2, the kids 3, and so on. And the same is true for you. It may look a little different depending on if you're married or if you have kids, but that is the way that life is meant to be experienced. This is what we're created for. But here's what I've also seen in my life. The times in my life where someone else other than God is number 1. Maybe it's Melissa. Maybe God's in the 2 spot. Sometimes maybe God's shuffled to the 3rd spot. It's Melissa and the kids. But I have found that whenever that's going on in my life, that those are the times in my life where I am not trusting God. He's not number 1 relationally to me, and I'm trying to be a hero. And what I've also seen is that when I'm living life that way, I'm oftentimes, probably every time, stuck in anxiety and or depression. I'm stuck in a place of worried about the future and worried about the past instead of living present in the moment with peace, enjoying the journey with God. And here's the worst part of it. The worst part of it is that in those moments, I'm not enjoying the journey with my family. Guys, there are so many of us today that are living life stuck in the future, stuck in the past, not living with peace in the present moment, enjoying the journey with the ones that God has blessed us with. And I'm one of the worst offenders at this. And it ultimately comes down to we're not experiencing this relationship with our God, living with Him being number 1 in our lives. As you read through the Gospels, what you discover about Jesus is that He Himself had the closest relationship with God, the most dependent, trusting relationship with God out of anyone that's ever put their feet on the soil here on planet Earth. Jesus often spoke about His relationship with God was so close that the words He spoke were the words that God gave Him. The actions He took were the very things that God told Him to do. And as Jesus was living His life, He invited people to follow Him. And the reason why He invited them to follow Him was not because He liked large crowds. The reason why is because He loved these people, and He was sent here to give His life for people, to die for people, but also to teach them along the way and to model to people along the way that life is always meant to be lived as human beings on planet Earth with our Father in heaven. So Jesus noticed a number of things that people were just struggling with, and one of those was worry. And he spoke into that. And I want to show you, in part, what he had to say one day as he spoke about worry. Matthew records this for us in Matthew chapter 6, beginning verse 31. Jesus said this, "So don't worry, saying, 'What will we eat?' or 'What will we drink?' or 'What will we wear?' For the Gentiles eagerly seek all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But instead of that, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be provided for you." So Jesus, he knew the hearts of people. He knew these people, like all of us, were worried about not having enough. But he also knew the heart of God for these people. And what he was, in so many words, saying to them is, look, your worry is so unnecessary. Your worry is a waste of life. Your worry is living like a practical atheist or like a pagan who doesn't believe in a personal, loving God. And so he told them, stop worrying. You don't have to worry because your heavenly Father knows what you need and he will care for you. And then he ended with this, verse 34. "Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." He concluded by saying, you don't have to worry. Your Father's going to take care of your needs. So here's what you need to do. You don't need to worry about tomorrow or focus on that. That'll come if it does. You'll deal with that stuff then. You need to live now, present in the moment, enjoying the journey right now. Just by a show of hands, how many of you in here just love a good vacation? Besides me. Okay, just quickly. How many of you are thinking about planning one now that I brought it up? So I love a good vacation. The reason why I love good vacations, at least in part, and I know this goes without saying, is that that's a time where I just get to get away from work and stress and all that and just chill and enjoy time with my family. Create memories. A couple of months back, I was just driving around the city, and I thought about this verse 34, about not worrying about tomorrow, for today has enough trouble of its own. And as I began to think about that, the Spirit began to say to me, Jonathan, what Jesus is saying here is that you need to every day take a vacation from worrying about tomorrow. It's interesting, isn't it, that when we take vacations, we all know that when we come back, we're going to have a ton of work to do. You know, we also oftentimes say we need a vacation after we get back just to recover, you know. But we know that. But the reason why we take vacations is because we know we need the rest, and we're okay with it because we're thinking, hey, I'll get to get that next week. For now, I'm blocking off this week. It's just myself, my spouse, my kids, family members. We're going to soak this up and create memories. We choose to do that, believing we'll get to that next week. What Jesus was speaking to here is that we are to live our lives every day taking a vacation from worry from tomorrow and the next day and the next day. To choose to do that. Recognizing that whatever I need tomorrow, God's going to give me that. Whatever I need today, He'll give me that. The key is in this moment is to live trusting Him, being present in the moment, and letting Him give us a peace to enjoy the journey for the day. What we all know is that life, this journey in life, is very, very short, right? The older we get, the older our kids get, I remember my parents telling me this, the more we're a reminder, the more our eyes are open to that life is like a vapor. It is just, boom, it's gone. And what I know is true is that none of us in here want to waste our lives living stuck in the future, worried about the possibilities of what will happen, which oftentimes we know don't happen, or stuck in the past in depression, worried about what happened in the past. What we all desire is to live at peace in the present and enjoying the journey. This is where we want to live. And what I'm seeing and what I'm learning, guys, is when it comes to the mental health things that we struggle with, there's no easy solutions to this. It's multifaceted. There's a lot of things that we need to do. We need to take care of our physical health. We need to sleep better. We need to eat better. We need to exercise. We need good community. We need therapists. We need medicines sometimes. Those are things we need. But I'm telling you, there is nothing that replaces the peace that our Father in heaven gives us that's outside of this world through this relationship of trusting Him. There's nothing that can replace that. The foundation of our mental health is relational trust and walking with our Heavenly Father. All the other things are a part of that, but that is the foundation of it. And so many of us today, I'm convinced, so many of us today, including myself, get stuck in these other places. And it really comes down to us not really walking closely with God. I believe that the key to getting your brain unstuck is getting your heart unstuck in your relationship with God. That's the starting point. That's the starting point. Corrie ten Boom put it this way. I love her statement. She said, if you look at the world, you'll be distressed. If you look within, you'll be depressed. If you look at God, you'll be at rest. Isn't that true? There's a whole lot in this world going on around us. If you just focus on that and you get all hung up, as she said, you'll be distressed. You'll live in that place. I've been there. If you keep looking in, you're going to be depressed. Because who doesn't get disappointed in themselves? Right? As C.S. Lewis said, you realize how hard it is to be good once you try to do it. You figure out like, wow, being good is really difficult. We let ourselves down, much less other people. But it's when you look at God, as Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. That's where we find rest. That's where we find peace. And that's what he invites us to do. So every day that you wake up, that God gives you life, from now until your last breath, your Heavenly Father is waiting to go on walks with you. The Scriptures describe walking with God, which is journeying through life with God. He wants to walk with you in this relationship where you're constantly talking to Him. He's your closest friend. You pray. You walk through things at work and family and things you're struggling with and all those sorts of things. There's a constant flow of communication. And as the Apostle Paul wrote in Philippians 4, as you see these things in life that create anxiety in your life, because they will, those things will come, that you keep talking to God about those things, and what you'll experience is this peace that surpasses all understanding that will guard both your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. So here's my question as we get ready to close. As we look at Isaiah, what he had to say about God, I want for you to ask yourself this question. Do you want this to be true of you? Isaiah said, you, God, will keep the mind that is dependent on you in perfect peace, for it is trusting in you. This is something that God offers to all of us. Is this what you want? I know you do. For your mind to be at peace. And God is willing and wants to give that to us. So as we close this morning, I want to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes for just a moment. I want to ask you to think about a couple of things with me. And then in a few minutes, we're going to take communion, and the band's going to lead us. But as you close your eyes, I want to ask you just, how are things going in your mind, in your heart? Like, really? Like, I was asking myself that question. Like, really? Are you at peace? Are you enjoying the journey? Or are you stuck in the future and stuck in the past? And if you're struggling with any of those things, will you in this moment just pray in your heart? Tell your Father that, God, I don't want to live my life like this. I want that peace that you give. But be honest with God about what those things are. Be honest. Guys, you can't hide anything from God. He knows everything about you. The prayer that you pray to Him, sharing what you're going through, is not for Him, it's for you. Will you share with Him where you're at? Stress at work, stress over finances, pain that you've experienced that you're struggling to get past. Whatever those things are, disappointments, betrayal, fears, will you just share that with Him? And will you just tell Him, as I oftentimes do, God, I can't do this without you, and I don't want to try. Will you please just help me and give me peace? Imagine in your mind those things that maybe you're holding on to, that you're trying to control, trying to be like God instead of trusting God, will you just open your hands and say, here, things in my past, things in my future, here, God, I trust you. You take them. I'm tired of trying to hold on. Father, we are grateful that you have never once called us to be strong on our own in this life. You actually warn us against trying. Father, you always offer that you're here to give us the strength, to give us the wisdom, to provide for us along the way. Father, as Jesus taught us in how to pray, that we're to always approach you every day with a heart of dependence of, Father, I need you. And you always promise that you will take care of us. Father, I pray for everyone in here and just where they're at. And God, I know this is a very sensitive subject because there's no solutions that are simple and easy around some of the challenges we face with mental health and the wounds and other things that we struggle with. But Father, I ask that out of your mercy toward your kids, and we know you love us all, that you will providentially speak into their hearts things that they can choose to give you. And in the other areas, Lord, where they need you to just show up, that you would provide for them, that you would provide doctors, therapists, friends, to help them, Lord, whatever they need. I pray, God, you would do that. Lord, we thank you for loving us. We thank you for sending your Son, because you looked upon this broken world and you don't want it to stay that way. And thank God we know one day when Jesus returns, everything will be made new. We pray all these things in his name. Amen.